Just make sure that if you do have the other window open, that you mute that window, because otherwise we'll get feedback.
Okay, got it.
I think. Okay, I think we did it. I think we're live.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
awesome.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm just going to send out a quick thing on Twitter, and then we are pretty much ready to go. Okay. Oh, and there's a delay, obviously, so I'm going to turn that off because that's going to freak me out. Okay, cool. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our very first Art in Board Game stream. We're going to start by doing some basic introductions and give a little bit of background on each of us. And then we'll probably spend most of our time discussing the processes that we each use to create our artwork. And then if you have any questions, we'll get to them later. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we start with Kwanchai?
Me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm Kwanchai. And I'm here in LA. It's like 7 a.m. and I just managed to get on stream because I had totally messed up the time. Which is so I'm glad I figured it out. But I've been out of studio for a while. I've been away for a month, and so I'm finally back. It's of course it's con season, so there's a lot of traveling for me. And I've been doing some family stuff too. But yeah, I'm a board game illustrator and a painter. And what
maybe name a couple of games that you've worked on that people might know your work from.
I have done Catacombs and Kodama. Sorry, I should have prepared better. Kodama. Okay. I worked on Overlight RPG, which is the most recent thing that is going on for me. Kepler is a game I did. Oh, Flip Ships I also did. Capital Lux is another card game I worked on. And a bunch of other fun stuff, but that's probably the more... Oh, Dinosaur Island I worked on as well.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Some of the stuff I've been doing as of late.
Okay, cool. Jacqui.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Jacqui. I'm a board game and children's book illustrator. And games I've done recently were Neverland Rescue and Ex Libris last year.
Oh, yeah.
And many others. Euphoria. This one I'm actually doing I was going to say sequel, but that's the wrong word. But the extension of that I'm working on at the minute.
Stockpile is one of yours.
Oh yeah, Stockpile as well. Yeah,
I should say.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm Eno Toole. I'm a graphic designer and an illustrator. I've worked on probably Vital Lacerda's games, are the ones I'm most known for. So the Gallerist and Vienos and Lisboa, and Escape Plan, which is launching soon. I also worked on Stockpile and A Study in Emerald, 2nd edition, and some other games that I cannot remember. Cool. All right, that's us. So before we get into sort of nitty-gritty of our processes, which I imagine are actually quite different for all three of us, you want to talk about, I mean, are you guys gamers as well as being artists? Is that sort of part of the way your work happens, or?
Actually, I'm not really.
No?
My sort of hobby thing that I do in my spare time is I do a written RP with my friend Katie, who I mentioned before.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Which we figured out we've been doing now over 10 years with the same set of characters.
Wow.
So that's sort of, more my hobby, and when I can, I do art for that. But actual board games, not really, just because there isn't that much that many groups that I know of in the local area that do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to sort of go into Manchester or Preston, which is like an hour away. So no, it's not really part of the process for me as far as working in board games goes.
I'm a gamer for sure. I think the intersection of my interest in board gaming and art was serendipitous. But I was a board gamer before I was really more of a professional artist in any means. So yeah, really into board games for sure.
Yeah, me too.
What about you?
You can probably tell.
Everyone's
yeah. I mean, I've been a designer for longer than I've been a board gamer, a graphic designer and an illustrator. But yeah, it's pretty much my only hobby at this stage.
Do you also do role play stuff, role playing games and things? Like that?
No, and that's I used to. When I was a kid, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons all the time, and that's the only role playing game that I've played. I would love to play more, but I just don't have time. I barely got time to play board games at the moment.
Yeah. I found that we've been playing role playing games in our group here, and I didn't play as a kid, but Dungeons and Dragons and then a lot of other spin-off stuff has been like maybe half our gaming. So I feel it on that one, Jacqui, in terms of like role playing is really taken over.
Yeah, I'd really love to try it, but haven't got there yet.
I've recently started a D&D campaign with a group of friends, so it's quite different from the written one I normally do, because the D&D one is obviously more structured and more rules. And like the fighting, I find a bit of a mission to get on with, because it just seems to go on forever.
I should
it's
say,
entertaining.
I should say I've recently started playing a Middle-earth role-playing game with my kids. I have two girls who are 7 and 9, so we've just started playing Middle-earth role-playing.
Nice,
which is a lot of fun. Okay, so let's get. So I guess how did each of you start creating artwork for board games? Is probably a good place to start. Kwanchai.
Catacombs was the first thing that I did, game that I did, and it was with the company that already had the product out. So I think I was really lucky in that I was doing a third edition of a game that already had a fan base. So it was really like the perfect storm of things. I mean, the art being sort of not amateurish, but just kind of like off the cuff and a little bit less of a professional sheen on it. And so that combined with a lot of people, including myself, who were really, really into the game, made it kind of explode. But I just did it. I did a redesign thing for fun on Board Game Geek. So Board Game Geek was really a big reason why I have a career today. And that was the first thing. Yeah.
Did they contact you as a direct result of the redesign that you had done?
Yeah, so I don't know how it was for the two of you, but a lot in like 6 or 7 years ago, when I was first getting hits for things, a lot of it was through Board Game Geek, because I was putting stuff for fun up on Board Game Geek, so stuff came through there, and I wasn't really doing super professional stuff yet, and that's where they found me originally. So yeah.
How about you, Jacqui?
Well, I actually say I went to university and studied animation, and that's what I wanted to do, originally going to. But then I got into doing all the viz dev stuff of that while I was in university, so character design and backgrounds and whatnot. And then when I graduated, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I just applied for a few small freelance jobs on concept art.
Right.
To sort of start me off. And the two of them that I got were helping Jamie out on viticulture, and then Beth Sobel was doing, all the recruit cards, and I just did a couple of them. And then because I'd helped out on that, he asked if I wanted to do Euphoria. So that was one of the first games I did. And Formula E for Game Sloot was the other game. I think I worked on both of those simultaneously. And then from there, I think the next one was Battle of the Ball. And lucky enough, so that just sort of kicked off board games and stuck with it since then, really.
So I'm quite similar to you, Kwanchai, because I posted some stuff because again I had a portfolio of illustration work, and I just posted some random samples, very few of which were related in any way to gaming. It was just random things that I had sort of managed to do through other design work through the years, and I ended up getting some jobs out of that. The sort of at the same year I did the Gallerist and I did a Study in Emerald, the second edition, and both of those were really just accidents. I met Martin Wallace at PAX Australia, and he was playtesting a game. And I just sat down in his group and play tested a game with him, and we were chatting away, and I told him what I did, and then he said, "Oh, do you know anything about Lovecraft?" And I said, "Yes," because I'm a big Lovecraft fan. And then he just said, "Would you like to work on a game with me?" I wasn't even really trying to get work out of him. So that was pretty unbelievable. And then with Vitala, I just wrote Vitala an email and said, "I really like your games, and I'd like to work with you." And he was like, "Oh, we need the Gallerist done really quickly. Can you do it real quick?" I was like, "Okay." So yeah, just sort of happy accidents, really.
That's funny.
Yeah. So how much? Sorry,
did you do it really quickly? Did you do the Gallerist really quickly? Is that
real quick? Yeah, I sure did.
By the way, Jacqui, Formula E is an amazing cover of a game of anything, but those elephants are great.
Thanks.
So how much of each of your work at the moment is board games? I mean, for me, it's everything that I do right now is board games.
Yeah, for me, it's maybe 90%, 85%.
Because you do picture books as well, don't you?
I do a children's book line and then a couple other small things for some ad agencies here in LA. But that's it's basically board games.
Yeah. How about you, Jacqui?
Past few years, it's sort of been 70%-ish board games, 30% illustration stuff. Right now, as it turns out, I'm doing more illustration work.
Right.
With only Neverland Rescue, which came out, and the Formula. So you got there in my head now. Euphoria, that I'm working on now, is the board game.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a turnaround. Previously, it's been more board game work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So why don't we kind of get more into the sort of nitty gritty of processes, and I guess how they differ as well as any commonality that we have. So why don't we start with sort of how early we would typically get involved in the development of a game, and the answers for all these questions are going to be it depends to some degree, but I guess what are the benefits of getting involved early if that does happen, or is it better just to come in at the end and make it look nice? Jacqui, what do you reckon?
Well, typically I've always come in pretty much once the game has been play tested quite a few times.
Yep.
And the guys know what they want, so they just give me the list of assets and say, "We'll have at it."
Yeah.
Which so I've not really ever been involved in a game in its very early stages, so I couldn't tell you if that's better or not. But I do quite like just being given a list or even a spreadsheet, which is wonderful, and just have start.
Yeah.
Because then you can just work your way through it, and things aren't changing on you, which would, I imagine, be a bit frustrating for everyone.
Yeah.
How about you, Kwanchai?
Yeah, same as Jacqui. For me, the later I can be involved, the better. The longer it's been sitting around and refined, I think, the better. I guess it depends on how involved you are, because I've been, like, for most of Elzer Games' product, which are all like Catacombs lines, I was much more involved in the process of making them. It's a lot of work, and it's rewarding in a different way. But gosh, that's a lot of back and forth and a lot of emails and a lot of meetings, which can be it's different. But for most board games, I'd say to avoid some of the slog, it's better for me when I come on at the very, very end, and just maybe some small rule books tweaks are being kind of made. But yeah, I kind of like Jacqui, like if there's very clear spaces where the art needs to be made and that's not going to change, that's where I feel like I can just sit in the cut, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You're real different. I mean, you're way different.
Yeah, I'm completely different. The earlier I can get in, the better. For me, I love getting in at the early stage, and like even playtesting really rough prototypes and being able to give feedback. And you know, there's a couple of times where sort of the visual design solutions have fed back into the mechanisms of the game, and you know, things like that. And I love doing that sort of work, and it's a very different mindset than it's more my sort of graphic design brain than my illustrator brain.
Yeah.
As an illustrator, I think I would be in line with you guys. I think I'd much rather just, you know, give me a thing and I'll fill it with a picture. But as a designer, as a graphic designer, being involved and being able to just shift things around and during the development, and I guess it affect it on a kind of component and ergonomic level as well, is really interesting. But you're right, it can be a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, also I feel like there's at least with board games, I feel like a lot of companies there is such a push to get things out within as short a time frame as possible. So unless I put my neck out and be like, hey, I want to be on this at this early stage and be a part of the development, then that's not going to happen unless it's coming organically from me as an artist, at least in the cases. I generally try as much as possible to get in on the ground. I mean, not really when the game is being designed as such, but sort of once it's kind of hit development as possible. I mean, the games that I designed with Vital, I play them. I play very early prototypes of them, usually as much as possible, which is great because it informs the sort of depth of the design that I'm able to create. But it also means that, you know, like what you were saying, Kwanchai, it's lots of back and forth, and things can change, and it's difficult to predict timelines and all that sort of stuff. So it's a double-edged sword. But I in general, I'm pretty fond of that. It makes the product look amazing. I mean, you can see when something has grown up through both the design and the art together.
Hopefully.
You can tell right away, that kind of stuff. But definitely.
So what about actually playing the games? Do you guys tend to play the games that you're working on, or is that ever in sort of a part of the process? Or, I know, Jacqui, you kind of said that in general you're not really a board gamer, so that's sort of less of a thing for you. But do you find that sometimes is it relevant, or?
Again, for me that would be tricky, just trying to get a group together to play it.
Yeah, right.
So no, I don't tend to. I mean, occasionally, like with Dan, with Neverland, we had a Skype chat, and he sort of played the game on a table in front of me so that I could see what was going on.
Right.
And that can be handy.
Dan May, by the way.
Yeah, Dan. No, that's Dan May's Game Salute. Dan Letterman from
Neverland.
Games.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so he played it in front of me, and that's been handy. Or they'll send the rule book, and I'll have a flick through that. But I don't actually tend to sit down and play it.
Yeah. How about you, Kwanchai?
I've been doing it more since the last time we talked or chatted, and you were like, yeah, well, I jump in as early as possible. Really? And I was like, I am doing something wrong. I mean, I'm joking kind of, but no, I thought, no, I'm sure like both of you, every time I feel like I'm constantly learning. And if I'd known something in the last project, the project could have been better. So one thing I have been working on is trying to sit down with designers, since I'm at the cons anyway, and try and get a playtest through. I find that those usually turn out better because you can see the seeds of thought that the designer is trying to push forward, and visually you can like start somewhere, and it's less of a staccato, process moving forward.
Right.
So yeah, I at the very least though, I like to just sit down with like print out the whatever Google Doc they sent of the early rules and just have it in my hands on a couch and just like read through it and visualize it as I go. And sometimes they'll send me like the prototype files and maybe just do a quick printout and just see what things visually, like what's big and what's small, see what things matter to give importance to.
Yeah, I like to, when possible, on excuse me, on simpler, smaller games, it's often not necessary. But certainly on sort of more complex Euro games and things like that, I'm just lost if I don't play that. I really am just completely lost. So it really helps give everything context for me when talking with the designer. But also that for me, it's a really enjoyable part of the process because I'll print out the prototype as provided, or they'll send it to me, one or the other. And I'll play it. Sometimes when I say play it, sometimes I'll play it by myself. The purpose is really just to move things around and get it clear in my head. But I'll literally get a big marker and I'll draw all over it. And I really love that because it's almost like a living sketchbook stage of the process.
Yeah.
And I'll just scribble all over the bits and pieces. And by the end, it's completely incomprehensible. But I've gone through this sort of mental process of, holding the thing and moving things around. It's really important to me as well that I know, it sounds silly, but I know how big things are. And I just have a sense of the scale and
totally.
And a lot of that's kind of, we all know what size a card is, but if you've got like, a row of 8 cards and 20 tokens, it can be sometimes quite difficult. You can get it in your head that they're this size, and then you actually print it out and you're like, oh no, they're either way smaller or way bigger than I thought they were. So I find that stage pretty useful. Right, cool. So what about, I guess what we haven't really discussed and we should probably cover briefly is the differences between design and illustration.
Oh, that's interesting.
Design and illustration. So on most of my games, I tend to do both if I can. So we'll just quickly define graphic design is the design of the typically things like logos, iconography, any sort of user experience, UI elements of the game, whereas illustration is by and large the pictures, to put it simply. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I know, Jacqui, we've worked together on the same game. You on a few on Crosstalk and Stockpile. So you as the illustrator and me as the graphic designer. Now, on those games, we didn't actually. I say we worked together, but we didn't really have much interaction. That was mostly through the publisher.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit from the illustrator's point of view, kind of what's involved in that? And
I think with Stockpile, you were already working on it, and then they got me to do the just the art for it. And then, as far as I know, I just passed you all the little card illustrations, and then you have to go and put all the graphic design on. So I think I got, if I'm remembering correctly, because it was a couple of years ago, you might have sent some templates, so I knew where to avoid putting
right
illustration. But yeah, we didn't. So I found it's typical with. I don't tend to speak to the graphic designers on games. I just seem to do the illustration, pass it on to the publisher, and then that gets passed on to the graphic designer.
So do you find that typically that's the process, that you're actually illustrating before the designer gets to it?
Yeah.
As opposed to you getting a template?
Yeah, sometimes I'll ask for a template and I'll give, a very rough one, or even just like a little sketch on a piece of paper so I know where things are going to go. But I found I tend to do stuff first, and then it gets passed on to the graphic designer.
Right.
Which I do have lots of respect for, because I just can't do graphic design. So if someone asks me if I do it, I think I tend to actually give them Ian's name a lot of the time. Just go, you can do it.
How about you, Kwanchai, in your experience? I mean, you've probably both worked with, or at least worked on projects that other different graphic designers have worked on. I know you've worked with Peter, obviously.
Peter Wilkin, Jason Kingsley, and then a few other people. I worked with Heiko Gunther, who's also quite talented. I feel like the board game business right now especially needs, more than anything, more than illustrators, they need like really solid graphic designers who know how to put together a product and stay on a timeline and do the back and forth with the printers, even to get a product out, more than a good artist. But I kind of like Jacqui. I kind of just get the art to some into their hands, and then they kind of run with it. But I used to do it more, especially on smaller projects. I like doing logo work. That's probably the farthest extent of any graphic design stuff I do. I find that I quite easily get bogged down in minutia, even with illustrations. So like I'll do better with one big splash image like the cover, but then if I have to do like 20 characters, that's when I'm getting a lot of like, hey, where's the update from the publishers and or the creative directors. So graphic design definitely is not my forte.
So Dinosaur Island, for instance, I mean, it seems to me that game obviously has quite a distinctive visual look to it. Did that come from the publisher? I'm guessing.
That was so Dinosaur Island. It has a look, and I'm really glad it's gotten the success it's gotten. For the game, that it, like, just the bones of it are good, right? But I got on that project like way at the end. Like I have a feeling that they were trying to do it with just maybe just Peter Wilkin stuff, and his brother was doing all the little 3D imagery. So there's a really part of it's a very I guess you could nicely say it's a very like vibrant look to the whole game. But to me, some of it you can see some clash there, because I was brought on. Maybe because I was brought on so late, and then there was like the art and then everything else. So I had almost nothing to do with, that was really a case where here's some empty spaces and you need to fill them. And of course the cover and stuff as well. But really a lot of the look is Peter's handiwork. So.
Right. So I was going to say that the cover seems like the design and the illustration are fairly well, integrated, or at least were worked up at the same time, or conceptualized at the same time. Is that correct? Or
yeah. The cover was. I think the cover pulls everything together. It's a lot of moving pieces in that, and that would have I think if the cover didn't. Yeah, you're right. Is the answer.
So the design elements of that and the sort of, let's say, the compositional structure of that cover, did that come from you? Did that come from Peter? How did that kind of?
They had Molly and Nathan, who were the owners and the everything. Yep. They had an idea for the color scheme, and then I just went with an idea, and I used the loudest colors I could because that's what they wanted.
Yep.
And I just thought we'd tone down from there, but they're like, no, I'd like this a lot. And so we went with just a really as loud as we could sort of look to. And I find that a lot of games right now need a thing to stand out. It can't just, if it's a fantasy game, it can't just be a typical fantasy cover. So I think a lot of publishers know that and want to have as much resources as they can throw at a good cover. And Dinosaur Island is, I think, a good example of that, at least in the things that I've worked with. In the last year or two.
Yeah, I'm really happy that Dinosaur Island has done well, because it is, the look is, I guess, fairly divisive. Some people really like it, some people don't like it, and that's the same with everything. But when you really kind of step outside the box, that polarizes a lot more people. And I think Nathan and Molly, who are Pandasaurus games, by the way,
that's right. Yeah.
They tend to try and push the envelope a little bit more. I've done 2 games for them, and they've always been really supportive and very
Red
open
Scare.
Red Scare and Starfall.
That's right.
they've always been very open to, different ideas and different approaches and things like that. I think it's really nice to see that approach kind of, being rewarded and not being ostracized.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, let's get into the actual process itself. So, Jacqui, do you want to talk us through just the basic timeline of, not in actual time, but, do you do sketches? Do you submit sketches or options or color roughs, or how does it look?
I tend to submit sketches, and then once we've nailed that down, I'll do a color rough, and then from the color rough, the final, which tends to be okay, but occasionally we'll do tweaks. So I tend to sort of get minor changes along the way, and I don't submit that many options unless specifically asked to do so, just because I think I've seen the quote somewhere online, if you give someone 1,000 choices, it actually makes it a lot harder for them to pick what they want. Whereas if you just submit 1 or 2 ideas, then if that's completely wrong, they'll know. But it tends to be okay most of the time. And then we just go from there. And I find it also just helps speed everything up rather than bog people down right at the start.
So on a sketch for let's just say a cover, a board game box cover. At the sketch stage, how many options would you typically provide?
I used to do about 4, but now I tend to do 1 because I was finding they were always picking the one I didn't like as the final. So now I just present them with my favorite option.
It's true. Yeah.
So.
How about you, Kwanchai?
I was hoping that Jacqui would say 1 because if I have 2, then even if I have 2, I'll submit 1, and if they don't like it, then I have 2 ready. But really, I remember in art school, I went to a design college that had an illustration program, so it was a good program. But I don't know if it comes out of that, but we were told a lot your first idea is throw out your first idea because your next idea will be, organically better somehow. And I find that is actually very not true, at least in my own process.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to like the first idea.
Not true. Yeah, and I think maybe if you're designing, the cars or something that needs to run through the lines of it need to be kind of just run through a couple times to get a couple different shapes, and that makes some sense. But I often find that the first sketch I have captures that little magic piece of something that I had originally. So so the answer is 1 for me. I mean, it has been more and more, and I think maybe that's because, like the both of you, there's been a huge boom in board games, and my status or whatever as an artist has a little more profile, so I don't have to be jockeying around as much for work, and so there's more trust there, I find, and so with that trust, I feel better about that first sketch anyway.
Right. I guess there's a feeling that people know to an extent
what you can do,
what you do, so that's why they've probably come to you, for that work. I'm the same. I'm going to go 1 further. I tend not to even submit sketches. I'm going to show you. This is my sketchbook. Let's see if I can. You see that?
Yeah.
That is a sketch for a board. That's you can see how small that is. I sketch probably about 10 pages in a sketchbook of that level of sketch until I hit something in a layout that I think works. And I go straight from that almost to final.
That's crazy. Wow.
Almost. It depends. It depends how in depth the design is. But a lot of the time, I'll just go straight there because a large part of it is I tend to jump around styles a lot. So and sometimes the idea of what the style will look like is it's in my brain. I can see it, but it would take me so long to communicate that to a client and try and make them understand. And there's so much space for misunderstandings and all that sort of stuff, that I feel like sometimes I can't show it to them until it's done.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, so I generally just dive headlong into it, and I'll get to a point where I think, okay, if I give this to anybody, they'll get an idea of what the final thing is going to look like. Once it's reached that stage, then I'll show people, and then we'll discuss it and take feedback and all that sort of stuff. But until then, I just don't feel like a sketch can communicate what I want to communicate without me writing an essay and providing, visual reference and all this sort of stuff. So so that's me. I wouldn't advise that method of working because it's quite scary. I have put a lot of work into some things before I've shown it to anybody, and then I'll send it, and again, fingers crossed. Just wait for that email back where they say, "Oh God, no, we hate it." Yeah. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah. You've done all your Vital stuff with Eagle Griffin, right? Is that correct?
Up until recently, I did CO2, which is for GeoChicks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
that's a lot of. I feel like that works as a relationship. That needs a good relationship to run with that trust. But if it does work, that looks, the end product is amazing.
Yeah, that's a little different because Eagle Griffin are happy to let me and Vital work as our own unit. So all through the development and the artwork development. I mean, obviously, I show Eagle Griffin what I'm doing in case they really hate it. Mm-hmm. But they're happy pretty much just to leave it up to the two of us. So it's just us two trying to make it work, and then
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk briefly about tools. What tools do we use? On a very mundane, straightforward level. Jacqui, what do you use?
I have a Wacom Cintiq 24 HD, and
tell us what that is for people that don't know.
That's a drawing tablet that you can pretty much draw straight onto the screen.
Yep.
So, like a very, very big iPad, but very heavy as well. It's broken one table already. And
your wrist too, right? Is your wrist is your wrist better?
Hello.
Oh no! I was wearing one of those last month.
I might have to get one of those. Is that since you got the Cintiq?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Cintiq's to blame or just work in general.
Yeah.
And so I also did work on an Intuos before, which is also a Wacom.
So that is an RSI thing, right? A repetitive strain.
Yeah.
So that's some advice for artists out there.
Yeah.
Stretch
at the moment, we're calling it occupationally related synovitis, is what I've been told it is.
Oh, okay.
Which is sort of the area around the tendon that all the tendons go through.
Mm-hmm.
That's become inflamed.
Yep.
And we can't figure out why it's inflamed. It just is. And it's been going on for like a year now. And I don't know if it is the tablet or not. They think it's just to do with work.
Right.
So that's fun. So I had also had an Intuos, which I had in university as well. And it also managed to make my thumb swell up in uni. So it could be either. And then I just work on currently, I think it's a 7-year-old Mac Mini at the minute.
Okay.
Which is chugging along. And Photoshop CC.
Yep.
Yeah, and I work on also on a 23-inch. 23-inch. This is my setup actually. So I have but I recently upgraded to a Cintiq because of wrist problems. So since I've upgraded to a Cintiq, I haven't had wrist issues. I mean, it was like an overnight switched from serious swelling to no pain. But yeah, Cintiq, Photoshop, an old MacBook, getting older by the day, and that's it. I used to when I went through maybe like 2 Intuos 4s, like an Intuos Pro. I think it's called Intuos 3 before, and then the switch to the Cintiq has definitely been a big jump in productivity for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm I'm on a Cintiq as well. I use Intuos. So Intuos, again, for people that don't know, is a tablet that you draw on, but it's not your screen. It doesn't replace your screen. As I said, I use a pen and paper sketchbook as much as possible.
That's great.
For as long as I just love doing that. I use 3D software sometimes. I use Cinema 4D. I do pre-visualizations. I have a weird thing where as soon as I kind of know what the components of the game are going to be, I tend to try and make a version of it in the 3D software. So then whenever I complete a piece of artwork, I can pop it in, and it helps me visualize the whole thing as a whole.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So there have been occasions where, you know, the board is in there already, but then I'll do a design for a card or whatever, and I'll think it looks fine, and then I'll pop it in, and it'll immediately go, oh Jesus, no, you know, that doesn't work, or it clashes with this or whatever. So I find that handy. It's extra work that I probably shouldn't be doing, but I do find it useful to do. And yeah, that's Cinema 4D, and otherwise I'm just Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign is what I use for layout, and Illustrator for graphics work, things like that. So nothing particularly outlandish. So I guess so. The last thing I wanted to cover quickly is things like finishing files. You know, is there a lot that you need to know about providing files to a publisher, to a manufacturer? I guess from your guys' point of view as illustrators, primarily, this tends to be the domain of the graphic designer.
Yeah.
Do you find that you need to know about that? Is that something you think an illustrator needs to learn about, or is that, as I said, the graphic designer's job?
I think the main thing I think is quite handy to remember is just I always work in CYMK right from the start, because otherwise you do fall in the trap of using RGB.
And it looks amazing until you have to change it. Yeah.
Which looks wonderful. You paint. I love teals and blues and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you paint that, and then at the very end, if you switch it over so that, you know, for print, and then it just deadens everything. So
yeah.
I now always just work. Lucky enough, my dad actually was a printer, so I knew from very little to have files being very big. I always paint a lot larger than the final file actually has to be. Yeah. And always paint in CYMK so that the graphic designer or whoever needs the file for print can easily scale it around, and hopefully the colors won't be too messed up.
If you, as an illustrator, if you submit something in RGB, what's going to happen is either the graphic designer or probably maybe even worse, the printer is going to convert that file. And they're not going to look at it with the eye that you look at it with. You know, they're going to say, "Oh, these colors are dead. I don't really care." I mean, a graphic designer will probably pick up on that, and a good printer will and should. But often they'll just press the button and it'll convert, and what you get back won't look like what you're expecting.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you, Kwanchai?
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again exactly? I had a thought, but then
just about, you know, the final processes of submitting files.
Oh, right. I feel like the more you know about that process, the better an illustrator you can be. You know, like you just know. I mean, really, if the graphic designer wants as much bleed as you can manage, and as many layers as you're willing to give, and of course CMYK, and then you're good to go. I've only done very small amounts of. Like I've done 2 projects where I've gone all the way from illustration and done all the graphic design, and then also done like the FTP drops with the printer, and a lot of work.
What were they?
Sorry again?
What projects were they?
Trash Pandas, which is a small card game, and then most of the early Catacombs stuff. I was doing everything, and it's been really nice to work with bigger publishers who have their own graphic designers on staff, or you know, kind of like already freelancing with them. That's been much easier.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I often fulfill the role of graphic designer on my game, so I'll take it right through to the final submissions. But even as an illustrator, because I used to work with large format graphics quite a bit. I spent a good few years designing exhibit displays and museum displays and stuff like that. So I got super paranoid about resolution.
Mhm.
And I'd always run into cases where something wouldn't be big enough or we couldn't enlarge it big enough when we needed to. So I always do all of my files double size, even my boards.
Wow.
I do an actual size 20 mil bleed at 600 dpi. So that's essentially
Wow. That's
double
a
size.
big file.
Yeah, they're huge. They're really huge files.
Like my brushes won't work at that file size. I have to get a better. I have to get upgraded my RAM to do stuff like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it can be a struggle, but I'm starting to let go, and it's a paranoia thing for me. I know I'm not going to need to print my board twice the size, but it's just a habit, basically. I'm getting better. I did my last one at only 500 dpi.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I guess what else do we want to talk about? We do have a couple of questions.
Oh yeah.
I'll get to in just a second. Why don't we? I guess do we want to just talk about? Do we have any sort of overall advice to people who are trying to either get into board game art or
good.
design? And yeah, just basically anything that you can think of, something that helped you out, or something that you wish you'd known.
Mm-hmm.
Jacqui?
Well, I think on topic for me is just, well, for all illustrators, is to do the whole stretching thing. Actually, look after your hands, because
Right.
you don't want to end up getting a duff hand. So
Yeah, that's really good. That's advice you actually don't often hear, and it can really mess you up.
I only really started looking into that kind of thing when my hands started getting sore.
Right.
So if I'd sort of known to stretch it and do exercises for it beforehand, that would have been very handy. So that's my advice, I think, is look after yourself. And yeah.
Cool. That's good advice. How about you, Kwanchai?
I would say so. For me, I wish I had gone to my first board game convention I went to was Origins in Columbus, Ohio, and I wish I'd done that earlier, because really that's where the genesis of a lot of my freelance projects came from, and it was from interacting with people with the knowledge, with being a gamer, and being able to say, just parlay back and forth about all the fun things that I'm excited about. That was for me, that was a great intersection of bringing my talents to a place where they were needed. So I would say I highly recommend going to a board game convention. Even now, 4 or 5 years later, the people are so accessible, and the people that can hire you and that need the work are there. And I feel like that's you can do all the other stuff, emailing and have a website and sending out portfolio stuff like that. But I feel like going to conventions is a big one. And the only other piece of information I'd say is that essentially you're running a small business, and getting out sometimes and taking a vacation or having a clear financial plan, all those things are like super key. And it's hard to think about that when you like just get out of art school and you're just the clouds are beautiful, and being outside and just having a sunny view of your career is sort of like it's kind of ethereal, but really it's like have a 5-year business plan, and then that'll really help your success, I feel like. So that's the two things off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, you stole my one, which is get to conventions, which I think you cannot underestimate the value of just getting in front of people, and just creating connections with people in person. I mean, I live in Western Australia, thousands of miles away from anywhere, and I traveled 27 hours to Essen in 2015, and it was the best thing I ever did. And I've been going since then. It's absolutely worth my time and the money that it takes me to get there. So that would be my, yeah, just to echo that would be my main piece of advice. Cool. And the last thing, just before we get to questions, a very loose sort of subject. You know, talk very briefly just about inspiration and sort of things that inspire you, and you know what, even if it's just favorite artists, just you know list off a couple of things that sort of you think inform your work or your approach or anything else. Kwanchai.
Okay, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you what. Way back on Board Game Geek in like 2006 or 5, there was a guy doing redesign work. His name was Michael Doyle, and he was a graphic designer, artist guy, and he did some stuff for fun, and he actually did some published work too later.
Did a Chaos board, right?
Yeah, the Chaos board. He did like a Puerto Rico thing.
Yep.
He did a bunch of stuff, and I remember looking at that and being like, "Wow, that each of those things is so different, but manages to like knock the aesthetics of each game out of the park." And I remember that was like a big thing for me. That's where I first started. I was like, "Oh, I want to do that. I don't have any skill set right now, but that's awesome. I can take a game that exists and put a skin on it that's like my thing, you know."
Yeah, the thing that his work struck me as well early on, and the thing that struck me about it was it illustrated how sophisticated the visual design of a board game could be, and there wasn't a huge amount of that around at the time. There was some, but his work was very thoughtful and very just very sophisticated.
It was like board games as art, and each piece, every edge of a surface was designed with the art in mind, and one particular thing about it that I still try and think about today is that the thing about it wasn't necessarily the style of it or the particular medium. It was that it was excellent as a product. So no matter what the look might be or the theme might be, the thing that made it so good was that the quality and attention to detail was, at its height, at least, in my perception of it.
Yep.
So for me, I try and pull from a lot of different things as I pivot from project to project. So I don't necessarily I like to make things look very different from project to project if I can, because I'm trying to do what he was doing, which is like make the thing be that it, whatever it is, that there's a lot of energy brought towards the excellence of it, and not just one particular look that maybe defines my art or whatever, So I oftentimes I don't really look at other art to get inspired. It's often things like for Dinosaur Island, there's a lot of like toys, and from my like 80s 90s childhood, a lot of like the colors of the toys and the packaging, and not necessarily art, or so yeah. But I have a lot of, I'm sure like you both, a lot of books and comic books and all sorts of things all around. I do look at other games for inspiration more often to see what I should not go towards, because a lot of the art for a particular theme might be overdone, and I know, and for me as a safety to try and not do that, I feel like I'm starting on a fresher canvas and not having to compete with something that might be a lot better at that than I am.
How about you, Jacqui?
Well, sort of similar, that I don't tend to look at a lot of artists so much as I'm a big fan of history and documentaries, so I'll tend to have that on as I'm working. And then just say a particular project is about cowboys or something.
Yeah.
Then if I've previously watched something, then that's where I get a lot of my visual library from, is watching a lot of documentaries as I work. Right. So that tends to inspire me. Or if I just listen to something that I think is interesting, I'll file that away for later use.
Cool.
So that's what inspires me a lot.
I'm kind of similar. I mean, I there are lots of illustrators and comic artists and things that I really love, but it's also lots of films and anything that's just striking in a visual sense. I mean, I've got a thing for old 70s Italian horror films and all these things, with these like Dario Argento movies and these really bright, saturated colors, and I also really like sort of classical pen and ink illustrators, the sort of era of illustrations where magazines were illustrated rather than it was filled with photography. I also really love historical styles. So like yourself, Jacqui, just looking back at the sort of visual communication of an era and kind of what informs that and where that came from is really, really interesting. And especially in board games, that's something that comes up a lot because a lot of themes are historical.
Yeah.
So it can be really interesting to look back and, pick and choose bits and pieces from the eras that the games are, set within. Cool. All right. I'm just going to look at a couple of questions, and I haven't been keeping an eye on these, so bear with me for 1 second. I'm just going to read some of these out, and we may have answered some already. What is the relationship between yourself and a graphic designer? I feel like we've answered that. Okay, so how do you go about doing research for the illustrations designs for the board games that you design? Does the research differ between games that are region or historically specific and those that aren't? Yeah, let's talk about research. Jacqui?
Well, it's a good lot of that will start with Google. Just reading up as much as I can. That's the truth. Unless I've already sort of picked up on it somewhere along, the line of just watching and listening to things. And then I'll try and go back and find whatever it is, that book or that documentary, and listen to it again.
So of the games that you've worked on, which do you think you looked at the most reference for?
There's actually, I think, between two. One was Shakespeare, Dreams of a Bard, where I had to draw these Shakespearean characters.
Right.
And they wanted it sort of based on the iconic actor or version of that character, so I had to go and find a lot of reference for that.
Right. Okay.
And lucky enough, I have a book just sitting in front of me called What People Wore When, which is just a whole book of costumes.
Right over there.
Yeah. It's currently propping up the iPad.
Great.
And that's also very handy, so I had to look at that a lot. Yeah. And the other one was Colosseum, which is set in Rome.
Yep.
And I'd just come off watching, Rome and by Claudius.
Right.
So when they said, do you want to do that? I said, yes. Very into Rome at the minute. So a lot of my research is just, absorbing all the media to do with that particular subject.
Yep.
And then starting to come up with ideas.
Yeah. How about you, Kwanchai?
Yeah, a giant folder of Google images that I have gleaned for their content or their composition or their color. I usually start with like a mood board kind of thing where I'm mostly looking for colors first, and then once I have a color feel, then I'll come up with a composition for them. But I want to get a feeling of a thing down first, and that's, for me, that comes before referencing what the costumes or the buildings or whatever might be, but just like, what is the feeling of it, and then I'll go look for the things that fill that feeling out.
Right.
And then, just like the both of you, just it can come from anywhere, but it's especially like a good documentary will go a long way to help to inform that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if it's a region or historical setting, then I'll go straight there and look at everything I can find.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will very directly inform the final product. Lisboa is a really good example of that. I mean, that's the purpose of that game, is to reproduce that era. If it's a science fiction game or whatever, it's a little bit trickier when it comes to sort of searching out. I guess, having what we were talking about before, having watched a lot of films and looked at a lot of illustrated material, I kind of have this mental bank of things to draw on. And when it comes to, illustrating a game based on XYZ, especially if it's, and this comes back to what you were saying, Kwanchai, especially if it's a theme that's used quite a lot, to go and look at other games and kind of go, well, I feel like this game did this approach really well, so we're not going to do that. We're going to go somewhere else with it. You know, I may have attempted that, but this game has already kind of got that covered, so we'll go a different direction. So I think that's kind of market research element of it as well.
Yeah, and it's fun too. That's part of the fun part is the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. It's full of possibilities.
Yeah, endless possibility.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing that I often do is, again, because of my approach, the style that I use in each game often kind of emerges throughout the process. And there's a certain degree of just kind of experience and trust in myself that I can do that. It's a little scary at times that I can start a box cover and not really know what it's going to look like. And I just kind of know it'll get there, you know, which can be exciting, and it's really exciting when it works because it's surprising. And it's nice to be surprised. But so that sort of stuff is hard to research for. But it's really important to know, just to get a sense of your surroundings. Know what's been done before, know what you're trying to reference. And then, you know, if you are trying to replicate actual specifics of history, and that's when it gets into the kind of nitty gritty of costumes and, you know, design work and all that sort of stuff. But luckily all that stuff is super available. You know, it's not, that stuff is not hard to find. References for the things that people wear and what their hairstyles used to look like and all that. All of that's pretty easy to find online. Okay, is social inclusiveness usually from publishers or designers? So I guess an emphasis on social inclusiveness. I know it's blurry these days. Games like Role Player, Fog of Love are great in showing both male and female for players to choose. Okay, so that's a really good question, and it's something we haven't touched on. I guess, do you guys often find that social inclusiveness or diversity is a thing that comes is sort of, I guess, mandated by a publisher? Is it something that you guys will bring to a project sometimes? How does it come up? Does it come up sometimes at all? Or what do you think, Jacqui?
I think it depends on the game. I know with Neverland, we decided early on to make the Darling Children different from, you know, their normal Disney versions because one, we didn't want it to reference Disney at all. But in other games, they just decide to, you know, just sort of left up to you. I remember with Belle, I just got a list of character names, and then it was up to me, you know, what color I made them, what gender I made them, you know, what build.
Right. And
I just tend to, you know, I have a Google image folder saved in my computer of just thousands and thousands of just people I find interesting. And I'll just do that because, you know, the world is very diverse, so why not make the art diverse as well? It's boring if everything looks the same. So it just depends on the game. The only one I found where it was, you know, we made a conscious choice was with Neverland Rescue, because we didn't want it like previous versions.
Yeah. Kwanchai?
I feel like most of the publishers I work with now are specifically requesting diversity in the characters and in the cover. That's great. But oftentimes, like if I find myself being less and less art directed, not less and less, but there's less overhead art direction in the beginning and more of like, oh, what do you think you'd like to do? And if I just throw on the cover a bunch of like unexpected things, like for the overlight stuff, I was like, I would like my friend, she's Dominican, and I was like, let's put a Dominican woman like front and center on the cover. I didn't ask, I just did that, and they're like, this is awesome. And they can't really say, I mean, I guess they could say no, but I just feel like there's so much, it just made a better cover because it was, for me, because it was something that wasn't like anything that I saw on the shelf already. So kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where I just want to do different things. I have a lot of paintings that I was doing gallery work for before I started doing board game stuff, and it has intersected well with the projects that I've been able to be a part of. A lot of like sort of like female heroine type characters. Yeah, but I feel like a lot of people are asking for it nowadays. A lot more publishers specifically.
Or I found they don't bring it up if you do.
That's right.
They
That's right.
hire you expecting it to be diverse anyway. So
Right.
because they're expecting it, it's not brought up that why is that? It's just that's how it is.
Yeah. I'm the same. Publishers often do stipulate it in a brief, and it'll sometimes be very specific. So each character is a specific ethnicity, a specific gender, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it'll just be an overall direction, a variety of genders and ethnicities.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, if it's not specified, then that's just kind of my standard operating procedure, and it's never come up against any resistance. At least from a publisher, I've had a little bit of weird feedback from from gamers at times, just with including things here and there. But I to be honest, I pretty much ignore that. It's an oddity. It's an outlier. So I just wanted to touch on something very quickly about feedback from the public, because obviously diversity is a hot button topic at the moment, for want of a better term, people on forums and online are often not shy about sharing opinions, let's just say. And so, oftentimes those opinions are very well intentioned, sometimes they're not, and we'll put those in a bucket, and that's fine. But the ones that are well intentioned, I'd like to talk just a little bit about what is the best way to approach either a publisher or an artist to give feedback on something. Not necessarily that's feedback on diversity or something like that, but let's just say as an example, what is a healthy kind of constructive way that's I guess more likely to get a result, and what's not. Jacqui?
I'm not sure. I think personally I would prefer if someone just got in touch, so via Twitter, and just added me rather than emailing or something that's more personal.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have constructive criticism, that's fine. Sort of like you're used to that anyway. I've learned not to be too attached to work I do for other people.
Right.
You have to expect that it's going to be changed, and people are going to have thoughts on it because there are eyes on it.
Yep.
So I've not had too many negative comments. I tend not to go to places where I know if they're just going to be negative, because there's no point upsetting yourself. So, but yeah, overall, I would rather be approached, I think, personally, in public, on Twitter or something like that, where, there's no hiding behind closed doors saying, well, she said that and he said that.
Right, yeah. Kwanchai?
Yeah, I think if you have really negative things to say about, if someone has something negative to say, that you should say all the things that you feel, just not tag me in that post, and then the world can know about all those things. And really, honestly, like all the things people say, they're the speak your truths, but if they're positive, tag me 5 times, and if they're not positive, then just don't tag me, and let the world know your opinion. Like it's important for the publisher to know how their product is being perceived, and all illustrators know that they're making products for people, and maybe the gamer doesn't know that there's a huge pipeline that things go through, and the illustrator is one stop on the pipeline, but anything can change drastically if you're not careful. If an illustrator isn't paying attention, the thing that comes out the end could be markedly different from the thing that they'd intentioned to make.
Right.
There's budgets that people are unaware of. Like sometimes the budget is tiny, and you do your best, but you work within a tiny budget, and so there's a lot of factors that, of course, the audience doesn't really need to know. But of course, a product is a product, and I think people should say what they want to say. But just don't. It's not actually my idea. I saw that on Twitter. Like, if you have something constructive to say, that might be negative, you should say the thing, but just don't tag the creator, because that creators are already fragile enough. I think a lot of creative types are dealing with a lot of like being at home 99% of the day, and managing a life and a small business and all those things as well. So
yeah. I mean, I would say in general, assume the best intentions on the part of the creator, even if you don't see the result of those intentions in the work. So don't jump to the worst conclusion and accuse people of certain things, whatever that may be. Instead, I'm happy always for people to point out issues that they see, but I guess be willing to engage with the creator and explain what those issues are.
Yeah.
And I guess, offer feasible solutions. All this comes under be constructive, really.
Yeah.
But the industry at this stage is still so small that the consumers can still have a very market effect on the product if they approach it in the right way.
Totally.
I mean, that has happened in past, where people address an issue that they see. It's happened with my work, where people address an issue and it's been changed. Because, sometimes under budgets and deadlines, you don't have the time to realize something. And and when somebody points it out to you in a constructive way that you feel like you can engage with, it can often, not always, but it can often have an effect on the end product. And I guess that's got to be what you're looking to happen, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up pretty soon because we're coming close to an hour. We have one more question, which is a pretty general question. Dream project for any of you.
Ooh, that's
let's keep it within games for the moment, but it can be a designer, a type of game, a theme, anything you want. An existing game that you'd love to redesign.
Oh, that's a good question.
Whoever's got an answer first can answer first.
Well, I think I mentioned to Beth via Twitter a while ago when she was tweeting out game ideas. One I want to see being made is an Animals Are Farthing Wood game, because I loved that show when I was little, where they have to get to Idea Park.
That show is so nasty.
So if someone wants to make that game, please make that game. I'll buy it even if I don't work on it. It would be fantastic.
That game is that show is so violent. That's incredible.
Oh, I know, but it was so good. I loved it.
So
an Animals Are Farthing Wood game, or
do you know Animals Are Farthing Wood, Kwanchai?
I'm lost. I'm just smiling because I'm like,
the
it
Animals
sounds
Are
cool.
Farthing Wood is a animated show about animals who live, talking animals who live in this woodland, and they have all sorts of adventures and intrigue.
Uh-huh.
But it was punctuated with the most horrendous violence.
Yeah, like
I mean horrendous violence, like baby animals on skewers and just awful things in a kids program. Yeah, it was very interesting. Anyway, that would be cool. One of mine is actually Watership Down, which is different but related. That's one of my favorite books, and I'd love to work on something to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny because I have a list of like things that I'd want to do just for fun. Even if there was never a project, it'd like be a cool thing to do a poster for. And one of those is like the Redwall series that I read most of them when I was a kid.
All animal related.
Yeah, very animal related. So it's funny. I wish there was already a Fallout game, but I would love to do some Fallout art. That would be cool. There's also this. I don't know if anyone would know this, but there's a kid's book called Sideways Stories from Wayside School that I read when I was in elementary school that I always thought would be a cool game because it's so zany and weird. It's a very specific thing that I've wanted to do. Recently I've been looking for, I like science and historically related projects. And specifically I would love to do a game that has to do with like cells, like like ribosomes and nucleotides and all that stuff. And I just think that it would be cool to do a game where it's like anthropomorphized little cell blobs and stuff moving around and going to work and having briefcases, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
I have an odd sense of
was
humor.
it this Once Upon a Time Life? Was that the TV series, the
I was
cartoon
gonna say, I'm
series?
sure there was a TV series about that.
Yeah, little
Read
ambulance
that
Okay.
the bloodstream. And this is like in the 80s, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed that one. But that's what I want to do. That Once Upon a Time like that.
Yeah, I mean, besides Watership Down, I mean, 2000 AD is a big thing for me. I'd love to work on
that's right.
anything to do with that. Rome is it ancient Rome is something I'm sure I'll get to at some stage. I'd like to do something to do with that. World War One is also a big area for me. Also, which is a bit of a weird one, and I don't think it would ever happen. But I'm fascinated by the sort of era of American whaling, like the Moby Dick era.
Yeah.
Is completely fascinating to me. So I don't think we're going to make a game based on that, but you never know. Yeah, so that's it. I think we got to most of the questions. Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry if I've missed anybody, but I think I got to them all. Okay, anything you guys want to add before we sign off, or?
So if anyone ever sees me at a convention, please say hi.
Well, we should say where can people find us?
That's a good one.
Kwanchai. Where can people find you?
Well, besides online, I go to most of the big conventions. I'm not going to Essen this year. You're going to Essen, right, Ian? This year?
I
might go. It depends.
You should go to Essen. Come to Essen.
I went to Essen
Jacqui's
2 years ago, and it was definitely, like you said, like totally worth it.
Jacqui's coming. You should come.
Yeah, I might. So my fiance, she's German. I mean, she's been living here since she was a kid. But but there's always a reason to go because her hometown's like 2 hours south of the.
Oh my god! Yeah.
So
all right. So we'll see.
There's no reason not to go.
Yeah.
But I'll be at Gen Con in 2 weeks. And there's always like little signing things, and like not a lot of people come to those. So if you come, it gives meaning to my life. So. But yeah.
Jacqui.
Well, online, I'm most active on Twitter mainly with people, so people can find me there. With
What's your
Logic
Twitter?
Fairy.
Logic Fairy. Yep.
And yeah, this year I'm going to be at Essen, which is actually also my first con and first time I'm going.
Nice.
So I'm finally taking the advice of go to cons because previously I've been ignoring that advice.
Is it your first con full stop?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been to FMX in Germany, but that's a 3D animation conference. So same, very busy, but not at all a board game convention. So
right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's mainly where I can be found.
Right.
Twitter, or I do have a website, which is just jacquidavis.com. Or Essen if people want to come and say hi.
Yeah, I'll also be at
If
Essen.
I go, I will say hi to you, Jacqui. How about that?
Yeah.
You got one.
Yeah, I'll also be at Essen. I don't know. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Ian O'Toole Tweets. I have a website, which is ianotoole.com, which I very rarely update. So, visit it if you want to. But yeah, I'll be at Essen, and I'm always very happy to say hello. And you can reach out on Twitter is probably the best way to do it. Okay, I think that's going to wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your questions. Thanks, Jacqui. Thanks, Kwanchai. This has been fun.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks for running this.
Thanks for setting it up.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.